Hello, my dear friends. Welcome. Now we are going to continue with the chapter 11 Transport in Plants. Okay. Previously, we have covered about water potential, hypotonic, hypertonic, and isotonic. So, all these things are covered in the previous video. If you are not aware of that, please do check that video, and later, if you see this video, it will be very easy for you. Let's continue the topic imbibition. So, what is imbibition? Imbibition is a special type of diffusion when water is absorbed by solids, colloids, causing them to increase in volume. We call it as imbibition. So, the classical example of imbibition are absorption of water by the seeds and dry wood. So, the pressure that is produced by swelling of the wood has been used by prehistoric man to split the rocks and boulders. If we are not for the pressure, if it were not for the pressure due to imbibition, the seedling would not have been able to emerge out of the soil into the open. They probably would not have been able to establish. So imbibition is also diffusion since water movement is along a concentration gradient. So the seed and other such materials have almost no water. Hence they absorb the water easily. So the water potential gradient between the absorbent and the liquid imbibed is essential for imbibition. In addition, for any substance to imbibe any liquid, affinity between the absorbent and the liquid is also a prerequisite. Okay, so absorbing the liquid from the solid elements, which we call it as imbibition. By the solid elements, we call it as imbibition. For example, here the seed, which is a solid element, which has a less amount of water concentration. For example, the wood. Wood is also, most of the thing is being composed of solid. So, absorbing of water by these elements, we call it as imbibition. Let's see long distance transport of water. At some earlier stages, you might have carried out an experiment where you have placed a twig bearing a white flowers in a colored water. Has watched it turning the color. On examination, the cut end of the twig after a few hours, you have noticed the region through which the colored water is moved. This experiment is very easily demonstrated. The path of water movement is through the vascular bundles. So more specifically, the xylem. Xylem will makes the water to move. Now we have to go further and try and understand the mechanism of movement of water and other substances up a plant. Long distance transport of substances within a plant cannot be by diffusion alone. So, diffusion alone cannot transport the water from roots towards the leaves. Diffusion is a slow process. It can account for only short distance movement of molecules. For example, movement of molecules across a typical plant cell takes approximately 2.5 seconds. Okay, movement of molecule across a typical plant cell, 2.5 seconds. At this rate, can you calculate how many years it would take for a movement of molecules over a distance of 1 meter within a plant by diffusion alone? So, diffusion alone is not possible for the transportation of water. So, in large and complex organisms, often substance have been moved to a long distance. Sometimes the site of production or absorption and sites of storage are too far away from each other. So, for example, in carrot, the leaves will produce the photosynthesis through photosynthesis, but it has to be moved towards the roots, which is a quite long distance from the leaves to roots. So diffusion is cannot be responsible for the movement of the whole process. So other than diffusion, we need some other processes. So diffusion or an active transport would not suffice. So special long distance transport system became necessary so as to move the substances across the long distance as much faster rate. Water, minerals and food are generally moved by a mass or bulk flow system. Mass flow is a movement of substances in a bulk, not in a drop, like whole bulk in a huge mass or en mass from one point to another as a result of pressure difference between the 2 points. Like we already seen, the very best example is creating a negative pressure to drink a liquid through a straw. So that is like a bulk transport. It is a characteristic of mass flow that substances, whether in solution or in suspension, are swept along at the same pace as in the flowing river. This is unlike diffusion, where different substances move independently depending on their concentration gradients. So, the bulk flow can be achieved either through a positive hydrostatic pressure, for example, garden hose, or negative hydrostatic pressure, so suction through the straw. So, positive hydrostatic pressure means flowing of the water through a garden hose. So, the water is coming downwards. Negative hydrostatic pressure means the water is moving upwards. So the plants needs mostly the negative hydrostatic pressure, because the water, when we water a plant, the plant has to absorb the water and the water has to move from the roots towards the leaf stem. Likewise, the photosynthesis, like the sucrose or the glucose which is produced from starch, which is produced from photosynthesis, has to move towards the root and remaining parts. So both are very important, positive hydrostatic pressure and negative hydrostatic pressure. So the bulk movement of the substances through the conducting or a vascular tissue of plant, we call it as translocation. Means we are transferring, we are locating it into one more location. So we are transporting the thing from one location to another location. So from that only it came the word translocation. Do you remember studying a cross section of root, stems and leaves of higher plants and studying the vascular system? The higher plants have highly specialized vascular tissue, which we call it as xylem and phloem. Xylem is associated with translocation of mainly water, mineral salts and some organic nitrogen and hormones from roots to aerial parts of the plant. So the phloem translocates a variety of organic and inorganic solutes, mainly the leaf, from the leaves to other parts of the plant. Okay, so the major function of xylem is the liquid part. So the liquid part. In the liquid itself, we have the minerals, hormones, everything. We'll get mostly the xylem will be for the major part of the xylem will be from the roots towards the leaf, shoot, etc. So the phloem will be from leaves to towards the roots. How do plants absorb water? We know that the roots absorb most of the water that goes into the plants. Obviously, this is why we apply water to the soil, not to the leaves. So the responsibility of the absorption of water and minerals is more specifically the function of the root hairs. So the root hairs will increase the area for absorption. So more amount of water can be absorbed. Are present millions at the tip of the roots. Root hairs are thin-walled, slender extension of the roots. Root epidermal cells. So very small extensions that greatly increases the surface area for absorption. So water is absorbed along with the mineral solutes. So along with the water, the mineral solutes will come. Along with the mineral solutes by the root hairs, purely by diffusion. So once the water is absorbed by the root hairs, it can move deeper into the root layers by two distinct pathways. That is through Apoplast pathway and Symplast pathway. We have two pathways. Let's see the Apoplast. The Apoplast is the system of the adjacent cell walls that continues throughout the plant except at the Casparian stripes, which is near the stele. So Casparian strips will be near the stele of the endodermis. in the roots. Except there, the remaining all you will have a communication between the cell wall to cell wall. So we already seen the cell wall will be freely permeable. So the apoplastic movement of water occurs exclusively through the intercellular spaces and the walls of the cells. Movement through the apoplast does not involve the crossing the cell. Okay, does not involve the crossing the cell. In this picture, you can able to see. So we have the Symplast and Apoplast. So Symplast will be inside. So through the plasmodesmata, it will be Symplast. Apoplast will be through the cell wall. So you please observe the cell wall alone. You can see through the cell wall alone the movement of the water takes place. In the water, the minerals also will be there. And Symplast will be from cell to cell and from cell to cell. So like this, from epidermis to cortex, cortex to endodermis, endodermis to pericycle, and finally it will goes to xylem. And from the xylem, it will ascend up. So apoplast will be from cell wall to cell wall, cell wall to cell wall. Like this, it will come. So both are responsible, except at the Casparian stripe. It will not be transported. So this is the pathway of water movement in roots. So first it will be simple diffusion. From the diffusion to Symplast, Apoplast. And finally it will ascend to the xylem. So it is a very important question that at which area there is no conduction, means at Casparian strip with Symplast and Apoplast will not take place. This movement is dependent on gradient, nothing but change. So the apoplast does not require any barrier to water movement, and water movement is through mass flow. As water evaporates into the intercellular spaces or at the atmosphere, tension develops in a continuous stream of water in apoplast. Hence, mass flow of water occurs due to adhesive and cohesive properties of water. Okay, with this property itself, the water will get transported in this apoplast. So apoplast, some cell to cell and cell to cell. So from higher concentration to lower concentration, from higher concentration to lower concentration, likewise from one cell to one other cell, the water will be passed through mass flow. Next, the symplastic system is the system of interconnected protoplast. So neighboring cells are connected through cytoplasmic strands that extends through plasmadesmata. During the symplastic movement, the water will travels through the cells and their cytoplasm. So the intercellular movement is through plasmodesmata. So the water has to enter the cells through the cell membranes. Hence the movement is relatively slow. So the movement is again down a potential gradient. So symplastic movement can be aided by cytoplasmic streaming. You have to observe the cytoplasmic streaming in the cells of a hydrilla leaf. So here we can see the symplast from one cell to the other cell, from one cell to the other cell. The movement of the chloroplast due to streaming is very easily visible in the hydrilla leaf. Movement of water flow in the roots occur via apoplast. So since the cortical cells are loosely packed, hence offer no resistance to water movement. However, in between the cells the water will be moving in apoplast. However, the inner boundary of the cortex, nothing but the endodermis, is impervious to water because of a band of suberized matrix, which we call it as Casparian strips. So water molecules are unable to penetrate the layer, so they are directed to wall regions and they are not tuberized into the cells proper through the membranes. The water then moves through the symplast, again crosses a membrane to reaches the cells of the xylem. Okay, the movement of water through the root layers is ultimately symplastic in endodermis because apoplastic will not be happen. This is the only way the water and other solutes can enter the vascular cylinder. Okay, here the picture you can see. This is the symplastic pathway, that is through plasmodesmata, from cells to cell, cell to cell, the water is transported till the xylem. So near the endodermis you will have the Casparian stripes, which is made up of suberin. So there is no water can be absorbed. And through apoplast, so through Symplast it can move. Apoplast will move till the Casparian stripes. It cannot cross the Casparian stripes because water will not be absorbed here. So through Symplast only it will move till the xylem. So through apoplast it will go near to the endodermis, and after here it will convert into Symplast path and finally move to the xylem. So this is the Symplast and apoplast path. Once inside the xylem, the water is again free to move between the cells as well as through them. In young roots, water enter directly into the xylem vessels or a tracheids. These are non-living conducts and so are the part of a apoplast. So, the path of water and mineral ions into the root vascular system is summarized in this picture. We have already seen some plants have additional structures associated with that help in water absorption, that is mycorrhiza is a symbiotic association of fungus with the root system. So the fungal filament form a network around the young root or they penetrate the root cell. So the hypha have very large surface area that absorb the mineral ions and water from the soil from a much higher volume of soil that perhaps the root cannot do. The fungus provide mineral and water to the roots. In return, the root will provide sugar and nitrogen containing compounds to the mycorrhiza. Some plants have an obligate association with the mycorrhiza. For example, pinus seeds cannot germinate and establish without the presence of mycorrhizae. So that is the best example. So in the next video, we are going to see about the water movement up a plant. Now we have covered the topic about how the water is absorbed from the soil towards the root xylem. Okay. Okay, my dear friends, please do like, share